Singleness in your 40s takes on a new level of emotions and uncertainty, and there's not enough out there that recognizes this and helps prepare you for it. So that's what I hope to do today on this episode of Solving Jewish Singleness with a therapist that gets it, Liz Wallenstein. In the episode for singles in their 30s, I talked about starting a transition where dating shouldn't be the same as it was in your 20s. It's not healthy to keep approaching something the same way for decades. You should be evolving with time, and your approach should be evolving with you. That's even more true for people in their 40s. Even if we put dating and marriage aside, society makes a big deal out of turning 40. There's like an acknowledgement that you're in a different stage of life now. Things change for you. But the dating world doesn't do enough to recognize this and then help singles make that transition when it comes to their status. If anything, the message to singles in their 40s is, don't worry, you can deny your age. These are all the ways that you could look younger or fool people into thinking that you're younger than you really are. Or don't worry, you're not really 40. There's things that you could do to extend your fertility, which is a very good thing. I'm happy for that. But the message still is 40, deny it, pretend you're not. But so what really then is the experience of being single in your 40s? Women likely feel the emotions of this stage more profoundly than men. Fertility decreases for both men and women in their 40s, but is a much bigger concern for women. For women and men, if they don't have children, there's a very real fear of, will I ever? And what happens to me if I don't? They also, again, more likely women, feel their age held against them in dating, that they see their options become less, that people are, saying that they want people that are younger. Even for divorced people, even for people who may already have one child or more, there's still a sense of missing out on getting to be a family and some, sadness around that, or how lonely and awkward it could feel sometimes to be a single parent. Men are also dealing with this uncertainty, but a change that men often run into in their 40s is a change in their options. All of a sudden, they might be feeling like the creepy guy, that whereas in the past they could approach a younger woman with no problem, no issue, they might all of a sudden feel like if they do now, the woman's looking at them like, why are you talking to me? Like, you're not really my peer. They might also be dealing with changes in their looks. I'm talking about men now. Losing hair, gaining weight, changes in skin, not keeping up as much with like what's cool and hip because you kind of naturally just don't care about that as much anymore. And worried about how this affects their chances with women. Men also might feel like they're being judged more for their single status. It's being held against them, and that people are starting to give up on trying to help them or care about them because they kind of just assume like you did this to yourself. For either men or women, if you come from a culture where people tend to marry young, you could have childhood friends starting to marry off their children and even becoming grandparents in their 40s. Singles in their 40s are dealing with nieces and nephews starting to have real relationships and getting married. They're dealing with aging parents, which also contributes to fears of being left alone. My point is there's a lot of potential for deep emotional pain and shame for people in this age group. Now, before we go any further, I don't mean to contribute to the doom and gloom that you may already be feeling or trying to avoid. I know plenty of people who found great spouses and went on to have families in their 40s. So there's no reason to give up hope or be pessimistic about this. And if you saw episodes 3 through 8, then you know that I'm a big proponent of the miraculous marriage. That's what I consider my own marriage to be. That even when the odds are actually stacked against you, it is still possible to find somebody great, maybe even better than you imagined for yourself. So definitely no reason to give up hope. My point that I'm getting it at is that people recognize the potential for it to feel depressing when you talk about lack of partner and family at this age, and they want to protect you from that. They don't want you to feel bad. But I don't agree that by ignoring the very obvious elephant in the room that you're doing anyone a favor or that it necessarily feels better in the long run. We don't do anybody a favor by saying, you're going to be okay, everything's going to be great, when they're obviously dealing with big questions, real threats, and unavoidable changes in their lives. And sometimes it's the singles themselves who are contributing to this dynamic too, because they have their own resistance to confronting all the feelings and realities that come with being single at this stage of life. They may numb themselves to these feelings or find ways to distract themselves as a way of coping. Or they might be aware, but they'd rather hold on to hope and possibility. And they should. That's a good option. It is not time to give up for all the reasons that I mentioned before. The problem is you can get stuck. It can actually be downright destructive for you if you don't process the whole picture, the good and the bad. I'll explain to you how. This is something that I work with a lot. Emotions just kind of hovering inside of you without being acknowledged or properly worked through could lead to all kinds of neurotic states like anxiety, depression, pain, illness, obsessive thinking, control issues, addictions even, and more. On the other hand, spending too much time thinking about it can also be destructive, and maybe that's what people are, afraid of or trying to protect themselves against, because spend too much time and it could lead to depression and hopelessness, which can then cause you to lose that openness and that hopefulness and that spark that helps you to attract and connect with people. So these are obviously things that we want to avoid. So what's the solution? How do you find that happy medium? Something that I call digesting emotions. Digesting emotions is confronting the emotion and then chewing on it, processing it, really taking it in, kind of letting it work its way through you, work its way through your body, and then letting it pass on. That, the threat, the fear is that people think if they confront a negative emotion, they're going to get stuck in it and it's going to take over. But what happens is if you avoid negative emotions, it just kind of hovers and then shows up and manifests in different ways, like I talked about those neurotic states. But if you actually just kind of acknowledge it, let it pass through you, it becomes this temporary thing where you may have to feel something negative for a while, but it eventually moves on because it got processed and worked through your body, your consciousness. And it's possible to even just do that in one conversation. And I say that as opposed to something like journaling or just keeping it in your own thoughts, because I think it's crucial not to just have an awareness around it, but to be deeply heard around it. There's something very therapeutic and healing about somebody hearing you and feeling with you your experience of it. I think especially for women, even if you're not in therapy and you don't think you need therapy right now, it might be worthwhile to go to a therapist just for a couple of sessions to do this, to grieve, to mourn what didn't happen, to cry out from your heart your losses, your fears, your pain, to someone who won't jump in and try to save you from it or try to make it not so bad, but someone who will listen to you deeply and just sit with you in it. Someone who will give you compassion and understanding with just their presence. And somebody who will make you feel less alone in it, even if it's just for a moment. And when I say grieve, it doesn't mean closing the door on your hopes or letting them go. Everybody has things that they will need to grieve in their lives. This is yours. Even if you get exactly what you want, there's still going to be some grief involved. Everybody has that thing that didn't happen the way that they had always expected to happen, or the way that they wanted to happen, the way they assumed it would happen. And there's feelings about that. There's a shift that happens. Look, I'm an example of that. Thank God I got married and you know, I have a baby, but it still didn't happen exactly the way I always thought or wanted. And I'm definitely not complaining, but there's still some grieving involved in terms of the lost, what didn't happen, and what I kind of had to work with or accept versus, you know, my ideal. So even if it's going to happen, just the fact that it hasn't happened yet for you, there's a tremendous loss there. There's a lot of emotion, and you need to feel those feelings and be heard around them. And to be honest, not every woman is dying to be a mother. And not every man or woman is necessarily going to see it such a big loss if they don't get to be a parent. A lot of, I don't know about a lot, but there's enough singles out there at an older age who have ambivalence about this, who have mixed feelings about this. It could be one of the reasons why they're still single at this point. But my point is that even from women who downright knew they didn't want kids, and from men and women who were on the fence about it, like mixed feelings could kind of go either way, I've heard from them that they still needed to grieve it. That not having kids, or just the fear or the threat of not having kids, can be so profoundly something that affects you, that it's just something that you need to digest, to get out, to be heard around that. And I feel like it's something that can really make you stuck if you don't. I have one more piece of advice on how facing the truth can set you free. The best way I can think of illustrating this point is using an example from my own journey. When I was about 36, I was in a bad place. I had a lot of anxiety and obsessive thinking, and I had a relapse of excruciating back pain after many years of being pain-free. I had mentioned earlier in this talk how when you're only looking at half the picture, when you're denying some of your emotions, that's one of the ways that it can manifest, is through physical pain. I had resolved chronic pain over a decade earlier just by focusing on my emotions, which is another area of my expertise now as a therapist. But now I was back with a vengeance, so I started up therapy again in hopes to resolve it. I had not been in therapy for a while, but it felt like I needed it. Anyway, after several weeks, I was feeling better again, emotionally and physically. Here's how. My therapist helped me to see that I was driving myself crazy with rigid thinking. I was preoccupied with wanting to get married and having a family, and convinced that I knew the ways that that could happen for me. And since none of those ways were working out and I felt out of options, I was panicked. The pain is actually the panic kind of trapped in the body. The way my therapist helped me was by forcing me to face the tough questions I didn't want to consider and that no one else was talking to me about. I knew I wanted children. I knew that my preference was that my children should be my own. But what if? What if I only ended up with stepchildren? Did that have to be so bad? Maybe there could be actually something really appealing about being a part-time parent. Maybe I would end up loving those kids as if they were my own. Or, what if I became a mother, but the child wasn't biologically mine. Maybe using an egg donor, maybe adoption. Okay, wasn't what I had expected for myself, wasn't the dream that I had all those years. But did that have to be so bad if it came to that? What if I never raised kids, but through marriage became a stepmother, and then to adult children even, and then to their spouses? Could there be something enjoyable in that too? Did I have to raise them or have small children? Could just being family and being some kind of mother capacity also be rewarding enough? What if I didn't get purpose and fulfillment through motherhood, but I worked with people or volunteered or made meaningful connections through other ways? Could that be meaningful enough for me? Would I need more than that? Or what if finding the great love didn't happen in the ideal time for having children, but that I knew it would come even if a little bit later? Was it worth it? Could I open myself up to the possibility of a joyful life, even if it didn't follow the rules I already believed for how to get there? I can't tell you the release that happened for me after this conversation with my therapist of confronting these difficult questions I didn't want to face. My back pain disappeared, and it started a period of peace for me and just kind of contentment that I hadn't felt for years. I was able to let go. I wasn't racked with anxiety and worry and panic anymore. And not because I didn't care anymore about my ideal. That still was my ideal. I still was hoping for that and holding on to it and working towards it. But my fears no longer controlled me, because by facing them, I took away their power. And life felt full of possibility again. I felt like I could be happy again, that good things could happen. Now, yes, easy for me to say in a way. I was fortunate enough that I ended up getting my first choice. I got married, I had a kid and about to have another one that are my own. But I felt like a renewal took place for me when I had this conversation, when I answered these tough questions for myself, that enabled me to be open and present for when the right person did come along, and just be able to be in a place to receive that and be available for it. Your 40s is a time not to focus on a particular road, but rather the destination, because there are usually several different roads that could lead to one destination. If your destination is love or happiness or peace or fulfillment, be open to all the different roads that can get you there. Don't be fixated on the one or two ways you always thought of before of how you'd get there. And this doesn't mean that I'm asking you to settle. I don't believe in settling. I personally couldn't do it. I see settling as saying, all right, it's been long enough, just choose a person and make it work, even if your heart isn't in it. I'm actually telling you to honor your heart, but just be creative and flexible in seeing that there's different ways of doing that. I'm going to wrap up here. This was a hard one for me to do. I really had to push through resistance to do it. I'm talking to my peers now. There's also some survivor's guilt because I got out right before this stage, it feels like. And so, there's some guilt there giving this message, but I just think that I hope it didn't come off as depressing. It's just supposed to be really real, because that's what I'm saying is I think what's going to be helpful and what's going to be needed by this group that nobody else is giving you. That, yeah, there are lots of layers of emotion in this, and it needs to be recognized and it needs to be addressed fully. And that's what I tried to do here for you today, and I hope that that was helpful. I invite you to write me with your feedback if you think that there's other things that people should know about the experience of being single in your 40s, and ways to address that, or if you have comments on the things that I've shared. I do also recommend listening to the episode before this one for people in their 30s, because I think a lot of that is also really relevant to you and could be really helpful to you. Some really good stuff in there that I think that you'll benefit from. And like I've been saying in the other episodes, I see this episode also as an addendum to episode 15 about avoiding common dating mistakes, because there I give you my best dating advice for finding a healthy, happy, lasting marriage regardless of age. In these episodes, I'm just kind of breaking down challenges that come up by age. And it could even be helpful for some people to watch the episode for 20-somethings. Still some stuff in there that could be relevant to you, especially if you're in the earlier stages of dating for marriage. So good luck, and let me know the good news soon. I want to hear it. Thinking of you. Bye. If you thought this recording was helpful, please share it on social media so that it gets to more people that it can help. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. If you're interested in therapy sessions with me online, please contact me through my website or my email or social media. Feel free to send me questions and suggestions of what you'd like to hear me talk about through social media or my website, lizwallensteintherapy.com. Best of luck to you on your journey. I hope to hear good news soon.